I need to create a vacuum with competent people, but a vacuum of my decisions and reversible decisions, and let them actually lead and take ownership. It will allow you to go so much further. And I would say the flip side of that is if you hire leaders and don't let them lead, you're not going to scale.
Welcome back to the Dataliction Podcast, where we learn from leaders whose experience and faith shape how they grow their companies on purpose. Today, Travis and I are joined by Luke Jacobs, the co-founder and CEO of Encamp. Luke bootstrapped his company to $1 million in revenue and hit the wall every founder eventually hits. The business could not grow past his own hands. This one is about building leadership teams in phases, hiring people who know more than you do, and having the courage to let your leaders actually lead. And now let's jump into the conversation. Moving from the founder season into building a team, and then specifically a leadership team. Because it's one thing to have people around you helping you do your thing, but when all of a sudden you have that next layer, wow, that can be scary. Luke, I would love to hear from you. How did you solve this big problem? And what's the advice you can give to the other founders that are probably right where you are now?
Yeah, great question. And I wish I could say I've fully solved it, but it's, always going to be an evolving situation. I think, building a leadership team, and as your business evolves, the requirements of that team transform. But I can kind of walk you through how I've approached it different phases of the company. Early on, what I found success with in leaders were people who were very high energy, high performance, but more generalist. When you're kicking things off, and we started bootstrapping, so very much resource constrained, you need leaders who really are going to be doers as much as kind of people managers. You don't have the luxury of a large enough team even to have management be kind of the primary, job of your leaders. You really need them to be able to have the vision and the ability to execute on, things that actually move the needle on your startup. I think there is just a gradient as your business matures. You kind of win the right to build more specialization. I would say with leaders, you still want people who have the ability to kind of see across departments, understand your engineer needs to have some appreciation of your, sales teams, goals. It needs to tie together. But earlier on, I built our websites, our engineering leader was also, front end, back end, database, like literally anything. You need someone who's going to be able to really kind of know quality and execute directly. As we've grown, that's gone through different iterations in terms of being able to get leaders who, frankly, and I would say this is one of my heuristics, know more about the domain than I do, particularly if you're thinking about being able to comfortably remove yourself from owning the decision. So frankly, there's some amount of, I think, being a founder, being able to not be intimidated by people who know more than you, but in fact, you want to seek that out as much as possible and go and find people who are smarter than you in the areas you need them to go and own. And I think, I've got a bunch of, kind of lessons and heuristics, but two things that have stuck with me. One's, it's a Jeff Bezosism. So it's like, it's worked well for Amazon, but he had a decision-making framework that I've really liked, which is 1- and 2-way door decisions. And as a startup CEO, really saying a one-way door decision cannot be easily reversed. If we decide to pivot the entire company, if we decide to stop offering something, whatever it might be, those are decisions that are very hard to reverse, and those need to be made by the CEO. Basically, every other decision that's a 2-way door decision should not be made by the CEO. And the more you can really hold yourself to say, I need to create a vacuum with competent people, but a vacuum of my decisions and reversible decisions, and let them actually lead and take ownership, it will allow you to go so much further. And I would say the flip side of that is if you hire leaders and don't let them lead, you're not going to scale. You're not going to get the best out of your leaders. The second heuristic, I actually got this from a guy named Scott Maxwell, who started OpenView. They were one of our investors, still are. And he used a metaphor that I've really liked where if you're thinking about, redoing your house, you don't normally redo all of your house all at once. You're going to pick the room that's the least updated and get it updated. And for a short time, that's your nicest room. And then you go to your next room and you do that. And then you do your next room. And by the time you've done all your rooms, the one you started with is now your least updated room. I kind of think that's the approach with startups as well. You want to focus on your bottlenecks. You want to fill in your leadership gaps that are the most kind of critical. They're burning a hole in your pocket. Kind of, if you're not solving them, it's going to be hard to scale. And it depends on your business. If you're a technical founder, maybe you need a revenue leader. If you're a revenue oriented, founder and CEO, being able to go and make sure you've got some people on the technical side or the service side who are really experts. But kind of keeping a cadence where you're sort of seeing like what's good and don't worry about the stuff that's going well. Go and focus on the gaps, but then be prepared that that's only a point in time. As you continue to grow, might take a different person to go from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, might take someone different to go to a more enterprise focus. So I think that's that's been useful. And then I will actually share a third thing that I really like. And I think it's thinking about, it's probably good for management kind of across the board, but especially as a CEO, assessing, do people need a touch base daily to stay on track, every couple of days to stay on track, touch base weekly, touch base monthly? One of the ways that I've kind of vetted my really strong leaders that I build an immense amount of trust in is the time between syncs can be a lot longer. And frankly, you still actually almost talk to them even more. But if you think, kind of at a junior role, if you have a SDR, an SDR manager is probably touching base with their team multiple times a day. Let's kick things off. Let's make sure we're hitting the calls. Let's make sure we're hitting the emails. If you take that all the way to, kind of your COO partner or someone, your CRO, you could almost say, okay, our revenue goal for this quarter is here. You're responsible for it. Like, let me know if there are any issues, but, let's touch base in a quarter and see where you've gotten to. And obviously you touch base more frequently than that. But I think it's useful to kind of have that mindset and assume when you're ramping someone, you want the frequency to be high in terms of touch points. And as you build kind of that rapport together, it naturally can extend to the point where, I would say not relevant in a startup, but, if you think about big companies like a co-CEO, you're like, okay, we're going into EMEA, like see you next year when we're in EMEA, and we'll circle around then. So I don't know. I think those are some of the things, and the leadership team at Encamp has really changed as we've grown. Really from kind of founder-led everything, first wave of kind of leaders or the player coach managers up to where we currently are, where we have a built-out C-level team. CFO, CTO, CRO, our head of services. But that's taken, multiple years, and I wouldn't jump into that right away. If anything, I actually, can say from experience, like hiring too senior of leaders too early can really be a challenge because their superpower is going to be taking something that works and scaling it up. If you hire someone to figure it out 0 to 1, I'd say like maybe it happens, but you're really hoping that they've got, some kind of founder perspective actually instead of operational excellence, which I think the founder role is to validate. And then your leadership team expands the, kind of vision and grows it from there.
Luke, I really like that those different characteristics and where you're walking through like even the different stages of like, staffing as you're growing your company. One of my questions is how do you find those type of people? And it seems like you really need to have a good relationship to understand them a little bit more. So how do you find them? How do you vet them? And, do you think of future growth with them or do you think of growth right now? Walk me through that.
Yeah. I think in my experience, at least, the higher level a leader, the more it is important to probably vet those through your direct channels. A lot of our, executives, it's not like I knew everyone, but I knew people who had worked with them when we're kind of beginning the search. It's much less of like go and do a job board search and more work the network, work your board if you have a board or trusted advisors, other people you know building companies. Because I'd say particularly at a leadership level, a reference or a number of references is a lot more useful than even just the quality and the interview. Anyone who's interviewing for a C-level role presumably is pretty good at an hour-long interview, but what you really need to understand is how are they like when you miss a quarter or where things aren't going as well and there's conflict. So I think vetting people through network is really, really useful. Also, I think with ramping leaders, it goes back to sort of the frequency, but I think you want to oversaturate them with your time at the start and allow them to not only kind of get their feet underneath it, but frankly, like win your trust with you seeing it. Because one of the things that really goes wrong that I've even done personally is you're starting your company, you're building stuff, you kind of see how it works. It's really easy to project the things you're kind of seeing and feeling onto other people because they are competent and say they're just going to get it and be able to run with it. And then that goes from being very excited to being very disappointed quickly. I think it's better to be like, I think they're really great. In my mind, they're a 5 out of 10 to start, right? Like they're good, but like, let's win the trust so that when I'm saying, hey, go for it. Like you don't have to ask me about this. You actually feel that you know what you're going to get with that. I will say for our specific leadership team, I've really leaned in on this. And I will say, because some of our first executive hires, great people, super competent, did not pan out because we hired probably too senior too early and then gave too high of kind of a mandate too early to the point where it wasn't really ramping. It was kind of just, I don't know, it's easy to scale up complexity without, getting the progress that you want. We've really taken much more of the approach of we want to be a little slower to make sure we know who we're getting. So, 2 examples, my CTO, current CTO, has been our CTO for the last 2.5 years, absolute rock star. Like he really is very good. He came on as a principal engineer and we were kind of pre-headhunting for someone who could be a potential CTO, but was actually, we weren't advertising for a CTO. He had ran a previous, startup. He had been involved in a lot of things that, hungry, humble, smart, all these qualities we want. He's a driver. And explicitly, he was like, I want to get back into writing, more code, like managing less. I want to go and do some IC work. And that was great for us. We were like, let's do this. It was a year of him being our top principal engineer. And we're like, you should actually be in charge of this. You have a lot of the right opinions. You've got a strong perspective. You move super fast. And that's worked out very well. So almost allowed it to kind of organically grow into a role. And there is some luck in that, right? You have to go and have good hiring kind of across the board because that works if you can hire really, on the technical disciplines, strong principal ICs, give you the chance to kind of grow them. Our CRO, we literally engaged as a part-time fractional to start, expanded that to fractional but full-time. And then after a year of that performance, 4 quarters of her in the seat, said, there is very little risk from our perspective. And do you think there's risk here? Because also with a good executive, if they're not vetting you, you should be a little worried, right? Like they should have options. If they're not asking like, is this company like actually good? Are we going to hit the numbers? Like if they're just happy using you, you should think that might be a red flag actually. Instead of like, they've gotten to know you, you've gotten to know them, there's mutual trust. And then I do think within cultivating your leadership team, being able to trust the other leaders as well. When we make an executive hire, I am not the sole person hiring. That is it's not a committee, but we have a hiring group. You really try to see what people can do, both, go and get to know them. You've got the standard interview, but then it's great if you can meet in person, do some presentation from them that's more involved. How would you actually go and approach this larger problem? Come and spend 90 minutes with our exec team, almost function like you're in the team for a leadership meeting, like we're going to vet through, a problem we're working on. Because really, and I think this is maybe underappreciated, but startups are hard, and they're hard both because it's hard to do kind of hard stuff if it already existed, you don't have much of a business to build. But there's a lot of just psychological management. And I think leadership teams that can be cohesive and be the stress absorbers for each other and for the team can actually manage through all of the challenges that are just inherent to a startup. If you're just going for kind of raw talent, but they're not able to gel, like it's just hard to have kind of a high performer who can't be, a team player, like go very far from what I've seen. So I reference Hungry, Humble, and Smart. It's from Patrick Lencioni's Ideal Team Player. This is one of our kind of core heuristics, and actually Max Yoder and the Lessonly team, they got me onto this and loved the culture they built. And I don't know, really saying like being smart is important, but if you're not hungry, it's hard to really get the most out of being smart. But if you're not humble, then you just have a bunch of hungry, smart sharks in your organization who are nice to each other. And, it's important to also be like, no, humility, team mindset is going to be important.
So much about what you're sharing have to do with relationships and people. You mentioned cohesion and trust. Yeah. And these elements cannot be taken lightly. The greatest projects, the greatest companies I've been able to work with, it wasn't what we were doing. It was who we were doing it with. Yeah. And you mentioned something in the phases of growing a company that earlier on, you almost wanted more of a founder's approach. I would apply maybe flexible, maybe scrappy or inventive, obviously very hardworking, willing to do just about anything. And then you do transition later into those very focused, isolated in a safe sense of like, hey, this is your lane. Make sure every customer support ticket is answered, like those details. That's a big gap from the beginning to then the ending. Tell me a story when all of a sudden you realize with maybe your team, maybe you realized you needed a team, but when you saw, wait, it looks like we're going to need a bigger boat. This is more than we had planned on. We got to change the approach from this initial space to this next phase of our startup.
Yeah. I think for us, it was really going past founder-led sales into an actual go-to-market machine that could grow faster and larger than my kind of individual throughput limitations would allow it. So you started the company bootstrapped, did, kind of a lot of the parts, have two co-founders, but between the three of us, first year it was us. Didn't have a leadership team, kind of built it out. And I think really did have, kind of a vein of value. We were getting sales, we were moving forward. It was working well. Getting to around that $1 million mark was where we just started to hit a wall where particularly, and I will say like sales was something I could figure out. Marketing and the entire go-to-market kind of stack, I was like, if we rely on doing what I have, it's outbound, BDA, and then they talk to me, and then I can like pitch and, demo and close and all of that. But like we are going to get limited by like, one, that's just not a fully mature go-to-market process. I'm not going to be able to put on a marketing hat. Like, let me Google that for myself kind of thing. It's like I need some experts to be able to come and provide opinions that are more specialized and allow us to grow. And really thinking about, frankly, the kind of the 1 to 5 journey. I was like, if we don't get an actual go-to-market team in place with a leader who is also not me, because there is power in being the founder by being able to drop in and be kind of the, you're really there, you're kind of like finger on the pulse. And then the downside of that is actually there's value in having some amount of layers to be able to build a more kind of disciplined team, not being the one who's calling my own forecast and running pipeline and then hopping into deals with reps. It's like we need to have some structure. And I will say, I saw for myself, and I would say it really was probably around when we were at 1 million. And I think this is probably true for most startup founder CEOs. My instinct is to get excited about the new stuff and go and push. on whatever kind of that frontier is. And that I think is an important thing for a startup. You have to be able to keep innovating, and the founder kind of core to always be pushing kind of the where you are now is not the vision that you can see as the founder. But you need to protect an organization from yourself in a way. I was like, I need someone who is comfortable running just daily operations, same type of process on every call. Let's make sure that all of the demos have kind of the same core beats instead of, me being like, I can respond in real time based on what I'm hearing. And it's like, great, I can do this. But it's like, yeah, we're not going to go hire people who are me because, they would go and start their own companies or they're just like, it's just me. I started this one company. And so if I can sell the thing, it's like, well, I'm not going to go find a carbon copy of myself. And just knowing that also I was not going to be the person who would go and be a professional kind of go-to-market leader. Like, I think there is some amount of self-knowledge and what are you great at? I don't know. There's a little 2x2 grid that I really like where you've got 4. It's from The Great CEO Within by Matt Mockery, I think is his name. Great little book. But he's basically like, everybody has a zone of incompetence, a zone of competence, a zone of excellence, and a zone of genius. And he's like, the thing that startup founders get stuck in all the time is that you spend too much time in your like zone of competence and zone of excellence because you're like good enough at it that you can do it. Like, I can run payroll. It's not that not that complicated. I'm pretty competent at it, but you're like, it's not your zone of genius. And also you kind of naturally stay away from your zones of incompetence. So people I've often seen, I've seen this in myself, like you're too slow to replace stuff you're okay at, but not great at. You replace stuff that you really don't want to do. But I think with building a leadership team, and it is kind of that uncomfortable moment where like, I was good at selling. I mean, I'm still involved in our sales team. So I could have looked at that and said like, I can go and close these big deals. I'm good at this. Let's just keep doing it. But really looking at that and saying like, is my zone of genius being a go-to-market leader who recruits, vets sales talent, like make sure quota plans are built, make sure that there's a whole go-to-market kind of funnel that's mapped. I've got my demand gen. I've got my the BDA group. I've got my AEs. I'm thinking about whether this is an expansion or net new kind of team. Is there account management versus AE hunters? And just looking at that saying like, I can be competent at this, maybe excellent at this. I am not in my zone of genius. Like, if I was thinking about like, if I'm going to go get another job, am I going to go get a CRO job? I'm like, no, I need to go find a CRO who will actually turn this thing that is working into something that can work past my capabilities alone. And I think that, this is something that I think I am to actually fairly at least practiced at this point, maybe not even good, but I would say I'm not very control freaky as a CEO. I want to be involved in the stuff that matters, but I think I was looking, and I would say actually made a mistake, looking to be able to get people in the right spot. You do need to be careful because I will say I hired my first revenue leader before we actually had enough of the foundation to really give them the sort of make it repeatable. Because if it's just you founder selling and then you bring in a CSO or a CRO, that's a big gap to bridge. I think it's more like you get a couple reps, you've kind of done some foundational work, you're starting to see how it could be repeatable. But then if you look at, at least in my scenario, I was like, can I go and do this team build and make this my kind of full focus, not while doing this as well as we need it to be? That was kind of a clear trigger where we were like, we could maybe get bigger, but we're not going to be able to actually go and build something that is going to be a forecastable, repeatable machine here if we don't bring in some real talent to supplement.
I'm curious, when was that moment for you that you realized, okay, this is what I'm really good at. This is the moment that I'm okay with. Like, what stage was that for you? Like in terms of dollar revenue, maybe customer.
Yeah, I think for me, it was really clearly, at least on the revenue side, when we got our first big enterprise client. big deal. I knew that we've got press with them. So we worked with Amazon, got started with them in 2020. And me and our kind of original eng leader were sort of our CRO, CTO kind of equivalents at the time. And really just realized like we were making this happen, but it was like it was very close to being overextended. We went through a full InfoSec process with a big complicated company. I was like, I'm not the lawyer. Like we don't have SOC 2 yet. So we're kicking off like a SOC 2 process, just realizing actually, and it was right before we got to $1 million. We were kind of at like 800K in ARR, had really done the kind of founder selling, more mid-market. It was working. And then once we realized, and it was an exciting time because we were like, wow, we can sell big contracts. And then also seeing the amount of complexity that goes into a big enterprise deal and looking at our kind of addressable market and saying, we actually really do provide the most value to big enterprises and they're the highest contract value. It just makes the most sense. The pain is the highest, like it fit into our ICP. And then really saying like, that almost broke us to like me and this other guy doing this. We were like, feeling very incompetent, like a little bit of, past the comfort imposter syndrome where I'm like, we need people who have been like negotiating with huge enterprises as a part of their just like career. They know the right kind of, deal levers, places you can push back where, I felt like we pushed it literally about as far as we could go. And then that was my signal where I'm like, if we're going to close more of these deals, which we should, this is going to be a very different kind of organization that we need to be able to, kind of operate with at the enterprise level. That was around like 2020 for us. So sort of like looking at this first shift into, I almost felt like we went as long as we could get away with, kind of just putting it together and then being like, we're now doing InfoSec with counterparts who like, there's no rapport you build. Like it's a big giant machine that you're just going through their procurement system and negotiating like MSA terms and thinking, yeah, we need to bring in some supplementary stuff. And we did actually do that deal before we brought in anyone. So in a way, I think I could have convinced myself like we did it. Wow, like what a thing. But part of it is having a deeper vision because I knew I didn't want to stop getting to $1 million in ARR. It was partially like, okay, like it is now vetted enough that we can go and take the next, kind of steps to invest and professionalize up. But yeah, literally like did a TRS report or a TPS report. And I was like, I thought these were just from Office Space. Like I actually had not encountered these before. It's like, didn't you get the TPS reports? And I was like, oh, we're doing these. Apparently these are, a gigantic, part of these businesses that are totally unrelated to like our offering, right? It's just like the cost of, being able to even operate with that level of organization was something that really pushed us forward, in terms of couldn't really fool myself any longer.
So Luke, scaling the team, obviously you have to have these moments, product market fit, finally getting the big deal. You're up to $1 million. I mean, this is a moment that founders everywhere want to finally hit, and you have to scale the team. So 20 years ago, even just 10 years ago, scaling the team was entirely around people, which we've focused primarily on people. There is a new component to scaling that is available to people called AI. Yes, we are going to talk about it. Obviously, if you've listened to anything here on the Dataliction Podcast, our belief is that AI enhances the people that we do have. You mentioned getting great people. We think that great people with great technology, that's the dream. We don't want to replace people with AI, just enhance them. What are the ways you're seeing boots on the ground where AI is working, where AI is not working? What's your strategy around this? Because it's here to stay. It does help us scale. What are the limits and where are you really excited about it?
Oh, great questions. And I will say overall, I'm very excited about it. And we're seeing just positive impacts in our business and with our customers. And I'm in full agreement. We have not cut or even contemplated like reductions because of AI. And I would bet like people who do that are going to go and revert like at some point. Because I frankly think it's even maybe mischaracterizing what AI can actually do. I think there's a whole bunch of capabilities, but it's not a plug and play for what a person is good at. And frankly, it's also then good at things that people are not necessarily the best at. And it's finding the approach there. I think really, it also comes, because I will say, like, if I take my full empathetic approach, like if you're a giant public company, you have like 100,000 employees, there might be opportunities that I'm just like not privy to, like, I don't know, and your budgets are so gigantic. But at a startup, I've never met someone at a startup that was like, I have enough capacity to do all the things I want to do. Like a startup is an exercise in actually like, you want to go change the world. And then you're like, we're going to start with this little tiny thing that will feel like so uncomfortably narrow compared to the vision. And even, I mean, we're way bigger than when we started. And I'm still like, most things I want to do are not things we can do, right? It's like, can't open up every market, can't develop every product, like can't respond to every customer, like ask, like they have to be prioritized. So I think really for us, we viewed this as I'd say there are two core, maybe I use the word heuristics a lot, but it's like our rules of thumb on this. So you've got things that increase your margin by increasing internal operating efficiency. So there's stuff where it's like we take a lot of time doing support tickets. If we can put in an AI, process that can help us answer support tickets 30% faster, that is like getting a hire, kind of like we actually have talent that now is spending less time on a thing they had to do before. That's just great. You either, I would say, get to make an extra hire and do more stuff, or you get to say, we're more efficient and we've got a little bit better margin. We're still providing the same service to the customer. So there's kind of the stuff you want to do internally that you're already doing. I think those are the more obvious places to start, because every business also like go find something, go ask people like, what's the thing you do in your week that takes a bunch of time, you don't really like it, and like how can we automate it? Like they're out there. The other is then kind of like your vision wish list. And what we've been doing is basically saying things that we looked at, our roadmap, our go-to-market plans, that maybe we were saying we can get to that, but it's like 2027, we'll unlock this headcount, we'll unlock this, next kind of tranche of investment. We're finding that we can actually pull that forward, because if engineers can write code more quickly with agentic coding, unless you have no ideas of what to build to sell more to your customers, you're not like, oh, great, let's cut our engineering team in half. You're able to say, let's go and write twice as much code with the engineering team that we have and go grow faster and get more done. We're seeing that. We've been growing much faster in the last, frankly, 18 months. Of we've been just accelerating the product roadmap capabilities that it's like on a product side. With revenue, and this has been one that's been, frankly, a smash success. One of my co-founders, Sam, built an internal AI agent we're calling Ranger, that's revenue focused, connects into Gong, our CRM, like our marketing stack, our Slack. It's got emails. This is allowing every rep, again, it's not like, oh, let's have fewer reps. It's like if every rep can have 25% better business briefs before we're even taking that first call. And then once you've taken the call, it's like that thing that maybe you had to go into Gong. Now, on a forecast, you can say, hey, Ranger, like remind me of that thing that they said. Or to go a little further, because we're doing this, we're taking all of our conversations from revenue, and our product team is now using Ranger to say, hey, what are the things in the last 7 days on this product line that customers are asking for, didn't make sense, like couldn't find the button, like, and just Jenny and I, our CRO, we've gone through and been like, this isn't like, oh, great, let's get rid of our whatever RevOps functions. Like, no, RevOps is doing this. Now we can actually go and listen to every single thing a customer is saying without hiring someone whose full-time job is like listen to Gong calls and transcribe them and give them to the product manager, right? Like, because we've been like, wouldn't that be nice to be able to do it? It's like, yes, if we had a bunch of money to burn, like we could do so much more of that. But with AI, you're like, actually, we now can actually make ourselves smarter without being limited by just the reality of the startup. You're not going to get every headcount that you want. And it does go back to like, I don't know, I don't even have a number, but like if your organization doesn't have just like tens of thousands of people and massive bloat, if you have things that actually like you want to go build on your roadmap, the opportunity is that you can do more things with less rather than do the same stuff with less. If you're already in the same stuff with less mode as a startup, like I would actually really question, like, are you trying to build a startup? Because I think if you're trying to even raise capital or kind of take the next step, like if you don't have a vision of the next year, the 10 years out, where could this get to? It's going to be hard to sell the vision to an investor. It's going to be hard to sell a vision to your customers. It's going to be hard to sell a vision to employees if you're just like, we just do this thing and then every year we're just going to like tighten the screws and harvest some profit. It's like, so just a different business than I would say, a true startup where you should be saying it's a big enough thing that we should be worried that we'll never be able to get to the end state. Then you've really got like a big thing that's worth attacking. Because also I do think there is something, I don't know, we even did this in our founding story to go all the way back, like looked at our whole market. So my background is kind of farther afield, but I was an environmental scientist, went into environmental consulting. And as an environmental consultant, saw a few things. One, a lot of money moving. I was seeing actually like the environmental consulting firm is delivering a service that is valuable to the customers. And I can see it because like I'm doing the work and I'm seeing the P&L kind of moving back and forth. But then I saw another thing, which is this is like a time and materials space, except it's actually like a data space. So I'm billing my time like I'm a lawyer, but actually I'm writing like Python scripts to move around data. There's something broken here. I was reading The Innovator's Dilemma at the time, and I'm like, the opportunity is actually, there's a real market. It's just being delivered in a service approach, which is misaligned with the customer's goal is to have this be fast and simple and accurate and cheap if there are efficiencies. The consultant's goal is actually kind of minimize efficiency. Like you want to protect your billable hours. And my one co-founder, Sam, he was at Zenefits at the time. It's by the Parker Conrad, who then started Rippling. So kind of early HR, IT connected system. It's like this used to be your back office brokers. Now it's one SaaS platform. And I'm like, there's no Zenefits for EHS. There's no JustWorks or Gusto, but like a lot of there are analogs. There's no TurboTax. Like we need to prepare and track documents, and then they need to be delivered to counterparties at the right time, the right frequency. And in that, looked at it and said, okay, this is like a $40 billion addressable market. And we're going to start with literally automating one type of report that I had direct experience with and just build the one end-to-end, like we are TurboTax for this one type of report and go and see if we can actually sell any of that. And we could, and it was working. And then we've been able to, move forward. But the point in that is that like, where we started compared to the vision, like the vision is actually never really changed. It's still, the space is still operating. It's huge. But that allows, with the AI moment that we find ourselves in, being able to say like, we want to get into air compliance. We want to get into water compliance. We want to go into international jurisdictions. Like this is all part of our 20-year plan for world domination in the space kind of thing, not actual world domination, but like a big plan where you're like, if all the dominoes fall correctly, here's a huge business at the end of this. That allows you to then take AI and say, where can we pull that forward? Like, it's not like cut more people because that's crazy. Like if you're already in like cutting people, unless you're literally like, I'm going to run out of money and my business will die unless I can do this. Like there are times where you're like, you have to survive as a business owner, but if you're looking at the opportunity of AI as a cost saver, I would just invert that and say it's a force multiplier. Like each person in your organization can deliver more. You should try to make a bigger business and try to deliver more value ultimately to your customers.
Luke, this has been amazing. So switching gears just a little bit because we could lean into this for quite some time. Tell me a little bit about, what do you find fun and exciting right now? I know previously we were talking about how you moved to Florida. Sounds like an amazing experience. So give us a little bit of insight into your world.
Yeah. So outside of, Encamp keeps me pretty busy, but I mean, it's just one of the things that I do. So I have a wonderful wife who is the best, and we have an almost 3-year-old and an almost 1-year-old. And my one co-founder, also a brother, Sam, is one of my brothers. He has 3 children, almost 4-year-old, almost 2-year-old, and like a 3-month-old. So between the two of us living a couple blocks apart, we've got 5 kids under 4. And that's just like a bundle of fun. Also kind of crazy, like ramping my second startup of sorts. It's scaling up, more kids. It's a lot of time with the kids. Love to spend time outside. Honestly, one of the reasons I, came down to Florida was always, just bummed around Thanksgiving to put away all of my fun outside stuff and, go into kind of winter mode and being able to be in a place I run. I like to surf, like to stand up paddleboard. I will be honest, all of that has adjusted a little bit with having the children. I did a lot more outdoor. I surfed the most in my life, probably in like 21. It's like a couple years before I had my first kid. My wife and I were fresh in Florida. We were like, let's do it all the time. And then, reality happens. Children plus a startup, that's a lot of my schedule. Like to read books. I don't know. Those are probably some of the things going on. Honestly, something that just does excite me, and it is on the Encamp side, and then just sort of thinking about I would say I live in a zone between techno-pessimism and techno-optimism. Like I would say the potential for AI, like if I'm looking at this space where I'm like, our goal really fundamentally is making it easy for big companies to do the right thing. So it's like, how do we make the right thing as easy and economical as possible? And I'm like, AI has such immense potential to take this kind of disconnected, very challenging space and turn it into something much more streamlined, where my goal would be companies are like, we would be insane not to have a perfect environmental compliance record, because it's actually very doable. And the downsides are that everyone hates us. It's like, why would you not? But, that's like lowering the externalities to doing the right thing. The flip side is, it's the people, man. I mean, it's like if all of the power of AI goes towards like us clicking on ads more, that's a little bit scary, where it's like, but I look at this as like AI is actually just still, it's very different, but it's still technology. It's really how we apply it that, there will be great applications. There will be, less great applications. Sometimes I do worry about the amount of talent in our generations going towards things that are just like optimizing click-through rates or watch time on like kind of sloppy videos or whatever. But, I'm not a personal heavy social media user. I've been, never really took that swing. I use LinkedIn because I feel like you can't be a CEO without using LinkedIn. But, other than that, try to live an actually fairly low tech, personal existence.
Really appreciate you having taken the time for us today. This has been amazing. I've taken quite a bit of notes, especially as a founder, and hearing what it is for employees to take. And I'm really excited to take all this knowledge and help apply this. And thank you so much for joining us today, Luke.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you as well for hosting me, and hope that you or anyone else can get some value from it. I will say, if I can leave some parting advice, that even as someone giving advice on a podcast, that was good advice I got, again, from Max Yoder, who I would say like befriending or at least getting, connected to other people building companies is so useful if you are also even contemplating building a company. But something he told me that just stuck with me, and it's kind of ironic because it's advice, but just everybody has an opinion and you should listen to them. And then nobody knows the right thing to do for your business. Like, that's your job. So it's like, gather as many perspectives as possible and then actually like make your own decision. It's tough, but it's like, that's the actual job. It's, you don't want to bury your head in the sand. Like, feedback is critical, perspectives are critical. And then anyone who's like, this is the thing you should do in your business, like, you should immediately be like, they have no clue. Like, really, they just don't know. Like, should you put more time into sales and marketing or engineering there are a lot of options, and it's going to be context specific. So seek out advice, make your own decisions, validate with people who you trust. But I don't know. As I'm giving advice, I'm like, there are, I'm sure, counterfactuals for things I'm saying too. They work for me, but I think it's important to always own, for better or worse, like, you have the most context on your own business. And And just like, you got to actually accept that. That's actually part of the reality of building something. And it's both the greatest part, and then it really does, it's where the weight truly is, because like the buck does stop with with the individual making the decision. So hopefully people can get some good thoughts from this and then apply it in their own unique context to make it useful. Otherwise, you might as well ask ChatGPT, and we know that's going to be, it's all about the context. The context matters a lot.
Here's the question Luke leaves us with. What job are you holding on to that somebody else should do? Good enough at the wrong job keeps a company small. Hire people smarter than you. Hand them the keys and let them drive. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Dataliction Podcast. Luke built a team that can run without him, but most businesses run on tools that cannot. And if every report needs a human to stitch it together and your systems only talk when somebody makes them, you've not scaled. You've hired more hands for the machine. And that is the problem our team at Dataliction helps you to solve. Your own all-in-one platform built around how your company actually works instead of how some vendor thinks everyone everywhere should work. Simple, powerful, custom, and often cheaper than the big pile of tools you're currently using that it replaces. So go to dataliction.com and schedule a free call with our team. You might be surprised at the options that you never knew were possible.